It's good to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list to the Commander in front of us on a budget on my quest out brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. That deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out those links in the description. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're going back to a commander we've covered on the channel before, but I felt like it was right to go back. We got a couple key knights in Final Fantasy, and I do believe technically we got one or two in Edge of Eternities. I meant to do Jabari for Final Fantasy, and it just got out of my hands content-wise, so I thought, why not do it here for Edge of Eternities? Today we're talking about Sidar Jabari of Zhalfir. A 4-mana Esper human knight commander with Eminence, one of the first Eminence commanders printed in a very long time. Whenever you attack with one or more knights, if Sidar is in the command zone or on the battlefield, you're going to draw a card, then pitch a card. Sidar has flying and first strike, and then whenever he hits a player, we get to return a knight creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. Note that right on attack, we're going to be able to kind of hopefully put something we really want into the graveyard and then use Jabari to get it back. And this is going to be really used for a couple of our knights that are pretty high in the mana value, right? We can get them into the graveyard and get them back that way. Otherwise, we just want to get our knights in, hit some damage. We can, draw cards to try to get the right things we want in the graveyard to reanimate, and just have a great time doing it. But I want to say a quick thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos a little bit early for just $1 a month, consider checking it out down below. Well, okay. Truthfully, the amount of knights that are in Magic is very interesting, and there's a lot of really interesting ones that have been released over the last year or so we're going to talk about. First off, of course, the Siege from March of the Machine comes in, makes a bunch of knight tokens on the front side with Vigilance, and then you can flip it over into Fairy on the back, which can give you an emblem to give all your knights a buff and give them Ward 1. Fairy can also draw and discard, which fits very well with Sidar, right? Wanting you to pitch creature cards to get back. Bloodthirsty Conqueror, honestly, I 100% forgot was a knight. I guess I hadn't really ever thought about it. I mean, it makes sense with the shield and the weapon. But I totally forgotten that that it was a knight, and I think it's really useful for this deck since we're going to be such heavy attacking. I think this is going to be a great way to kind of gain some life back as we're doing the attacking and protect us. Of course, one of the big pieces from Final Fantasy for knights was Dion Bahamut's Dominant. A 4-mana white 3/3. When it comes in, we're going to make a 2/2 knight token. All of our other knights have flying, a great ability, something that's going to really help us make sure we get in for damage. And then for 6 mana, we can flip Dion over into Bahamut. That puts a counter on all of our creatures and gives them flying until end of turn. And then on the third one, exiles, destroys something, and then brings it back over to Dion's front side. I think at minimum, Dion is perfect on the front side, giving all of our creatures flying. If we have a key turn where we really want to buff the board, right, or two, we can flip Dion over and get that bonus, right, from Bahamut giving out the counter to all of our things. Exsanguinator Cavalry, whenever a knight we control deals combat damage to a player, we put a counter on that creature and get a blood token. Remember, a blood token, you tap it, pay 1, pitch a card, sack it to draw a card. So again, it can kind of help us potentially discard the things we want into our graveyard at the right time. This time around, I really went searching for knights, and I realized that I think a couple of the Liege knights back from Lorwyn and Shadowmoor are probably very good for us. Here, Glenelendra Lee's giving all of our blue and black creatures +1/+1. Most of the knights in our colors are either black or white at minimum. Some of them are, blue as well, but I think most of our knights in the deck fulfill Glenelendra's ability, which is nice. Also, Sidar does. Note that if they're both colors, they get +2/+2. So, of course, great for something like Sidar, who's going to be attacking. Hacken, we can only cast from our graveyard. And as long as it's on the battlefield, night spells from our graveyard we can cast, which is pretty cool. Of course, one of those ones we'll want to pitch and get back with Sidar, but it's nice to know we can recur those knights back out of our graveyard. Hatham Kenway gives all our knights a buff and a protection from assassins. And then when it comes in, you exile up to 1 creature each opponent controls until Hatham leaves the battlefield, which is an interesting ability. But again, the buff is really useful, right? Especially if you can bring it in the middle of combat. Right, your opponents to clear their blocks. Sidar's first strikes first brings Hatham back, and now you got that buff right for that attack. Herald of Hoofbeats giving all of our knights horsemanship. Remember, they can't be blocked except by creatures with horsemanship, basically making them unblockable. It's going to be very useful to get the damage through. Kinsbell Cavalier giving them all double strike is pretty great. Knight Exemplar giving them all light instructable. Here we're just loading up all of our knights with these abilities so we can rule the game in combat. I think one of the big knights that got released that Star really loves the look of is Moonshaker Cavalry, right? This was back in Wilds of Eldraine, but when it comes in, all your creatures get flying and +X/+X on the turn, where X is the number of creatures you control, right? That Crater Hoof style ability, but instead of trample, it's flying. This is great, and if somebody managed to kill it, of course, we'll happily take it back again with Sidar Jabari out of our graveyard to get the value. Roaming Throne is basically in here just to double up all of our Knight's triggered abilities. Remember that Sidar's bottom ability to bring a Knight back is a triggered ability. Same thing with the draw and discard. So there's a lot of ways we can take advantage of that. It's also just going to come in as a Knight, so it's going to count for all these other Knight-related abilities. Silverwing Squadron comes in and makes a number of white Knight creature tokens equal to the number of opponents you have, and then grows for each creature you control. A big flying vigilance creature that, again, is going to be pretty fun to cheat back and going to be a nice big flyer for us. Skyhunter Strike Force gives all of other creatures melee as long as we control our commander. Remember, melee says whenever a creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 for each opponent you're attacking, meaning that at maximum, all your creatures are getting +3/+3, a really relevant ability, and can be probably really tough for your opponents to deal with when you take a big attack. And then 2 Knights from Final Fantasy that we can get back to cheat out their cost. Knights of the Round, the big 8-mana Saga Knight. The first 4 sagas make a bunch of Knight tokens, and the last one gives them all a buff and protection. I love that we can then get it back with Sidar, but I think this is one of those ones we're clearly going to try to pitch and bring back. 8 mana is a ton. Same thing with Primal Odin, 6 mana for a 5/3. When it comes in, it hits, it kills an opponent's creature. Then it gains the ability whenever it deals combat damage to a player this turn, that player loses the game. So if we can pair this with something like flying or some sort of evasion, that could be pretty cool. And then when it goes out, it draws a couple cards and somebody loses life. Again, not a bad thing to recur if we had to, right? Getting that destruction and having that risk to our opponents. Suppressor Skyguard's a really interesting knight. So if a player attacks us, if that player is not attacking any of our other, if there's an opponent that isn't being attacked by that player, we just prevent all damage to be dealt to us. This is really great because it kind of forces our opponent to not necessarily be able to full swing out at us. It doesn't guarantee we can't take lethal damage, but at least is going to slow down the amount of scenarios where someone can just full swing at us if they're not swinging something at our opponents and putting something right in harm's way. Thistledown Liege, buffing up white and blue creatures. Again, a lot of our knights are, again, in white, and some of them are in blue. So, again, same thing, right? Useful for that buff. And then Vidalian Wave Knight. Whenever we draw a card, put a counter on each other merfolk or knight you control. Sidar's going to draw us at least one, right? So that's pretty useful. And because Sidar's ability says whenever you attack with one or more knights, right? So it can't go off, unfortunately, multiple times in a combat, right? It's only going to be able to go off once. But again, still, there's the counter there. When you draw your card for the turn, there's the counter there. We're playing things that draws cards when our creatures hit. There's the counters there. Wave Knight can really buff our board. Speaking of that, how can we draw cards? Well, things like Chivalric Alliance that came in the deck. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, draw a card, and you can pitch cards to make Knight tokens. Again, good way to get things into the graveyard. Kindred Discovery, whenever a Knight comes in or you attack with a Knight, you draw a card. Again, killer way to just fill our hand as we're doing what we already want to do. And then Distant Melody is kind of a nice one-time way to draw a bunch of cards equal to the number of knights we control. And there's more in the deck, whenever you hit a player, draw a card type abilities. But this is just some example of the card draw that we have access to. But I think what we really need to do is focus on getting our creatures to hit harder. I think people are going to pretty much know what our game plan is, so we need to make sure we're hitting hard when we're doing it, and so we need these abilities that buff our board. Patchwork Banner is a nice mana rock for us and can buff all of our knights by +1/+1. Circle Loyalty is a really fun artifact. Comes down 1 less for each knight we control, so it comes down to just double white. Buffs all of our creatures, and then whenever we cast a legendary spell, we get a knight token, and we can tap it for a knight token. Again, just a nice way to get a bunch of value on one card. Of course, we love the idea of something like Banner of Kinship. Whenever it comes in, you choose a creature type. It gets a fellowship counter for each creature of that type you control. And then creatures you control of the chosen type get a counter on it for each, or get a buff for each fellowship counter on it, which is really useful. Put it down at a time where you have a amount of good knights, and then even if you get the board wipe, this stays around, the counters stay on it, and all your buffs, all your knights get that great buff. Knight's Charge. Whenever a knight we control attacks, each opponent loses life and you gain a life. Note, that's not defending player, that's each player. And that's honestly a lot better than I think people give it credit for. because if you're attacking with 8 knights, that's already 8 for each opponent in 8 games, and then before you even get into damage. And then for 8 mana, you could just bring all knights from your graveyard back to the battlefield. Note, you can do that at instant speed, so you could do it before your turn and take a big swing or something like that. Radiant Destiny will give a flat buff, but as soon as you get the City's Blessing, gives out Vigilance as well. Great to attack and block. Virtual Loyalty makes you a knight token on the adventure side, and then on the enchantment side, at the end of your turn, puts a counter on each creature you control and untaps them. Basically gives them vigilance, but the extra point is that it gives them a counter, right? Growing them and making them more of a threat. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is a recent shot at Sidar. And I think going into testing, I'd want him to go, am I hitting hard enough? Do we want things like Etchings of the Chosen for another flat buff? Do we want things like Cathar's Crusade to just mass buff our board? I love the idea of Cathar's Crusade. I just wasn't sure if it was too much mana for what we're trying to do. But that's something we can consider going into testing. I believe we're playing Herald's Horn already, but you could think about something like Urza's Incubator to make all your knights too cheaper, right? There's a lot of options for reducing the cost. I just was trying to prioritize adding the new things like Summon of the Round and these new knights rather than the sport pieces. But I think, it's good to kind of keep this in the back of our mind as we're testing and try to determine, do we have enough of these pieces? And if not, commit to more. But let's do what we love to do on the channel the most and get into our playtests. Remember, the goal of playtests on our channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not just to show off all our best plays, but remember, it's to get in some gameplay scenarios and kind of see what kind of hands we want to keep and what we're looking for and how we're going to set up our game plan. Here we've got 3 of the 4 mana we need for Sidar, and I like this because we have a nice Vigilance out of that. We have a knight that we really want to get in, and we have a knight we really want to get in, right? Moonshaker, I think we'd rather reanimate with Sidar, whereas we don't mind casting the hoof beats because it gives us the value. And then Distant Melody can draw some cards. So I don't mind this at all. I was going to say more ideal when we get a land, and we see a land there in the Fetid Heath immediately. So I think we get the Talisman down. So now the question here becomes, do you do Sidar or you do something like the hoof beats, right? Like what makes the most sense? I kind of like the idea of just getting Sidar in. Yeah, we have to leave him there unprotected for a turn, but I don't think we mind. Painful Truce lets us draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast it. We could do it for 3, but we wouldn't really be able to do anything else. I guess the question becomes, what would we want to get back this turn? Cavalry doesn't make a ton of sense. We only have 1 knight. So I kind of like the idea of just getting the hoof beats down, attack with Sidar, draw discard. I think I'm discard land, and note that Sidar is not a May. You have to return target. So I don't know that I want to dump Moonshaker just yet. It just feels awkward to only do with 2 creatures in the battlefield, right? I'd kind of rather get some more value. Think about a Painful Truce for 3. Just again, try to dig into some more things that we have access to. I love putting down something like the Knight's Charge there after it. Now getting into combat, attack with both. Everybody loses 2, we gain 2. Star's going to have us draw. We can start getting some more card draw with the the Kindred and the Distance. So although it feels weird here, we could do that again. I hate to do the Moonshaker now because I worry that we're not getting enough value out of it just quite yet. Maybe it's just the Prairie Stream because I think we still have enough mana to get down key pieces like Radiant Destiny and draw. I don't want to commit Moonshaker too early when we don't just have enough to profit from it, right? So here my thought is, if I Distant Melody, it's just 2 cards. If I Kindred, Discovery, and Attack, it's 2 cards. I could go Distant plus Radiant Destiny. Either way, we're getting 2 cards. Kindred's probably more turn over turn draw, right? Whereas Distant Melody is right now. So I kind of like the idea of the Discovery. Maybe we can draw into another land, to play in a future turn. But go to attack, right? We're going to draw 2 off the Discovery and then 1 off of Sidar. And I'll throw the Swordmaster in. That seems like something that'd be fun to get back this turn. Again, it can't be blocked, so it's pretty much guaranteed to get in. When Swordmaster comes in, that draws us a card, right? Because a knight came in. And now Loyalty should be able to come down pretty quick. Squadron, there's another great creature we want to get back, right? So I'm liking the look of this so far. It was 5 mana. I have 2 mana left. I think I actually have 2 white, but I am just 1 away, right, from from being able to get the Circle of Loyalty in. So go to hand step, and I think I'll just pitch the Squadron since it's something we want to get back. Now, I think is when we'd want to try to target the squadron to get back, so we can get a couple knights and then go for the cavalry. The Exemplar doesn't feel bad this turn, right? Just to give everybody indestructible and make sure we have a little bit of protection there. There's the Soul Ring to help us out. So 3, 4, 5, 6 mana. I can get that down for double white. I thought it was maybe Radiant plus Circle of Loyalty. Now we're getting the double buffs there. They're getting Vigilance. Again, everybody attacks, draw, pitch the cavalry, and I still like getting the squadron first. Again, getting the being what, 3 knights probably. Because we'd have 3 opponents, and then they can't be blocked still, right? So that's a nice attack. And then, like I said, now this next turn is where I'd try to get the Moonshaker back now that we have, more knights on the battlefield. If somebody tries to wipe the board, we got that Flawless to try to protect up, right? And we would have we would have probably drawn 4 there. So now we'd have some more pieces in our hand, to continue to commit to the board. Again, I think the point is trying to pitch the right knights and get them back at the right time and just build that board state right, turn over turn over turn. But let's get into playtest number 2 here. Keeping a 4-lander with Hatham. There's the Talisman and then Knight Exemplar. I like it. Knight can help protect Sidar when we get him out, right? And protect our other knights as well. Get the Talisman in. So I have a couple choices. I could go Arcane into Knight Exemplar, or I could just dump in Sidar. I like the idea of just getting in Sidar. Again, I know that Sidar's ability can go off from the command zone, right? But I still want to make sure we're getting value here. Sidar would draw. I think I just pitch the squadron and get it back. Again, I think it makes the most sense. Start gumming up the board with some knights, right? Again, they get indestructible too because of the Knight Exemplar. And then now there's the alternate commander of the deck that we had, Elenda Nazor, which can draw some cards. But a Chromoswell could be a choice here. Squadron's a 6/6, but by the time it ends up dealing damage with its double strike, it would be a 6/6, and on second strike, it'd be what? Probably an 8/8, because I think we go after like the Hatham here. But again, this could be a massive swing, basically giving them all flying and double strike. On the first strike, they're not going to have that big buff, but on the second strike with Hatham, right, they'd have a really big buff. I only have 7 mana though, so I can't like Hatham and Chroma's Will, right? But I still feel like that's the option. A Chroma's Will, I think what? Squadron plus Sidar is 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So actually, it's not probably enough to knock more than one person out. So maybe it's just Hatham here for turn that gets us the buff this turn when we attack. Well, there's the cavalry. Man, that changes a lot. Get the cavalry, bring it in. Now you're already +2/+2 from Hatham, and you're getting an extra 8. I think I still would probably spread this attack out, even if I didn't know I was going to get the cavalry. But man, the cavalry really helps, right? Especially with the indestructible. Going to get some big attacks. And then I think we just untap and use that. Chroma's Will to just hopefully just finish it off now that you have a bunch of these out there as well. And you could just pitch and get back the Valiant Knight, for the buff there. Let's get into playtest number 3 here. Keeping a 3-lander with Talisman Hierarchy. There's the Exemplar again, but we got those 2 knights we talked about, Knights of the Round, Primal Odin, those triggers, those ones we really want to get back. And get your Talisman down. Hatham isn't even a terrible choice to get in, but I kind of like just getting Sidar in. I could be wrong on my eptness to want to just slam Sidar in, but I think it's because I kind of want to get attacking with it and start making him a threat. Right now he's a 5/4 attack, and I think I'm just getting Knights of the Round, right? Draw, pitch the Knights of the Round. It comes in, making those 3 knights. Again, now the whole goal here is those Knights of the Round is just going to start flooding the board with knights, right? Going wide, goes off again, 3 more knights, but they just can't attack this turn. I think it's Hatham giving the buff, hold up swords, and can't hold up D-Spark. I can hold up swords, but I can't hold up D-Spark. Go to combat, and I 6 attackers this turn. Do you wait for the cavalry next turn? Maybe you slam something like the Odin back to try to set it up next turn to take a big attack. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we can't like guarantee it in the air. But I think bring it back, destroy something, take some big damage. And then this turn, well, there you go. You raise the palisade, right? Bounce everything back. That's not a knight. That should guarantee that the Odin should be able to get through, and then pitch the cavalry for lethal. Again, little Christmas landy, but I think it's good to see the lines develop, right? Let's go into playtest number 4. You're keeping a 4-lander with that strike force for the melee, generous gift, and then our battle. Again, I like the look of the battle. Can make you a couple knights, right, to get the party started if you need it. Wonder, another fun card to pitch into the graveyard, gives all your creatures flying if you control an island and it's in the graveyard. We already have our island, so that's pretty great. Don't see really any good plays there on turn 2. Turn 3, I like the strike force. My thought is we're just working our way into Sidar here. Sidar draws in. We could discard the Wonder. The only problem is well, I guess it already has flying, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But I was trying to think of, like, do you preload the Conqueror into the graveyard? But probably not. We don't want to tip our hand too much on what the plan is. Would have loved to see a 5th mana for the Banner or the Conrad. But I think we just Knights for 2. So this makes 2 Knights with Vigilance. 6 power, we could go after it with something like Sidar this turn if we want to, with the melee. I think attacking the battle would trigger melee to get a buff. I could be wrong on that one. I guess we'll have to think about that. Maybe it's worth just hitting Zabarin, because I really like the backside of the Phyrexia, but maybe it makes more sense just to attack, and then I'd probably just draw, pitch the Conqueror and get it back, right? And then that way you're gaining some life from the damage being dealt. And now as we come back to our turn, I think now we can go after the battle this turn because we'll have some other attackers to go elsewhere. I mean, bannering for 5 doesn't seem like a terrible choice here. It's a nice buff to all of our creatures plus the melee. I mean, it could also just mean, this could also just be go to town, just hit our opponents instead of flipping the battle. I was going to say, unless I draw anything better, I think it's just Sir Conrad coming back, right? Hurting our opponents if they try to block and their things die. We have a couple really huge flying attackers. Again, +5/+5 because of the banner, so you've got 7, 9, and 10 respectively. And then they're all getting melee from the hunter. Means that they're 10, 12, and 13 respectively that are big damage in the air, and you're gaining life back from the Conqueror. And then again, I think we're just in good shape. You don't have Vigilance, unfortunately, so this Clever is free, right? Because we may not have creatures to convoke for it, but I don't think we mind. If people wipe the board, then they're already in the graveyard, right? I just forgot they have flying because of Wonder, so even these would be in the air. These would be what? 7s plus 3s would be 10/10s in the air. I mean, we're probably just dealing huge damage this turn to our opponents, gaining a bunch of life back and just being in good shape. But I'd love to know what you think of Sidar down in the comment section below. It's a really interesting deck. My buddy Josh plays this deck. I think the deck's a ton of fun. I love the play pattern of it, getting the key knights in the graveyard, and I love seeing us getting good knights to support this deck to really make it better, to make it harder hitting, and hopefully Wizards gives us some new knights soon. I did put Servandum in here. I thought about the uncommon one to give all your creatures death touch on attack, but I figured with enough of this flying we had laying around, we probably didn't need it as much, but that's an option. But we'll see what knights come out soon, and maybe we can revisit this one soon. But I'd love to know what you think of Sidar Jabari, and we'll catch you all next.